This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On this episode, is Rhode Island doing enough when it comes to climate change? A discussion with environmental activists Ken Payne and Paul Roselli. And this conversation comes on the heels of a report produced by Ken Payne and Paul Roselli titled Insufficient. So you kind of get an idea right there from the title of where their heads are at when it comes to Rhode Island's management of climate change. And you may remember about a year ago, we had a roundtable discussion on climate change responding to Rhode Island's Executive Climate Change Coordinating Council. Ken Payne and Paul Roselli were on that panel. And even back then, it was sort of like, yeah, we're not even close to where we need to be. We've certainly seen a surge in the youth-led response to climate change policy here in Rhode Island and beyond, of course, with the Sunrise Movement. You think about, marching on the State House, the climate rally last fall. So a lot going on in this department. And today we're going to hear from two veterans of this movement. And by the way, new episodes of the Bartholomew Town Podcast are up every Tuesday and Friday. Share on social media, tell a friend. Go ahead and leave a rating and review if you want to help support the show. And as we move towards election season, you're going to start to hear more and more episodes focusing in on Rhode Island elections, Rhode Island candidates, policy analysis as we make our way towards first the primary in September and then primaries in September and then, of course, to the general election in November. So Bartholomew Town, your Rhode Island election central. And hey, happy to do it for you. Okay, let's get into today's conversation. Paul Roselli and Ken Payne. Is Rhode Island doing enough when it comes to climate change? They say no. Here's why. So, as we've moved through, I should say, the COVID-19 crisis, and certainly now in this period here with an re-emerging lens upon social inequities across the board, other aspects of our states and really world's problems, infrastructure have been not swept under the rug, but the attention hasn't been paid as much as it would be probably in quote-unquote normal times. One of those areas is climate change and just generally environmental concerns. Joining us today, Ken Payne and Paul Roselli, who I think it was like a year ago we were on here discussing the EC4, and now we're back at it. I want to read this report that just came out. It's titled Insufficient, and I'll paraphrase here. This is basically when it comes to climate change, Rhode Island needs not less science but more, not less public engagement but more, not less planning and reporting, but more, not less formality, but more, not less assessment, integration, and coordination of state agency activities, but more. The state and the EC4 must move beyond business as usual and the short-term thinking that drives the allocative efficiency of our market economy. Adaptive efficiency is vital to long-run economic health. Greenhouse gas emissions are cumulative. The effects of what we do or do not do will be born in the future. So Ken Payne, as the author of this report, Insufficient, kind of speaks for itself, but can you sort of touch on exactly, where we are today in addressing greenhouse gas emissions and climate change broadly here in the state of Rhode Island?
Bill, first of all, you're right. We were talking about this just a little bit more than a year ago. And I wish I could say that the year that followed was progress in Rhode Island in a significant degree. What this report shows is really we just continued business as usual. EC4 met as it did what it did, and didn't do what it didn't do as usual. And in a period when there was really throughout 2019 a mounting sense of emergency around climate, EC4 just went on as though nothing had changed. And that's the context in which this analysis was written. When you look at what the big news was at the end of 2019, is that Australia was on fire. And it was the second hottest year on record ever. So here we had all these signals, but our own government system wasn't picking up on it. And what this more dramatic version of the analysis did was say, we have to pay attention. What we're doing is not sufficient. Now, how do you gauge sufficiency? You have a bar, and when you get over the bar, you say we're sufficient. If you set the bar low and you can step over it, that you're over the bar. But if the real bar is a higher one, stepping over a lower bar and claiming success may make you feel good, but it's not what we need. And so if you really look at this, what we did was we accepted science of the period when Al Gore was still vice president. That feels like a long time ago now. And we didn't look at the science that came afterwards and the Paris Agreement, which was recognized in Governor Raimondo's executive order, or anything like that. We can continue to use the pre-2000 science and then self-congratulate ourselves as a state for stepping over that bar somewhat. We got over the bar really in two ways. First of all, we used the emissions data from the winter of 2016, which was a very warm winter. Thus, there was few emissions from heating systems because people weren't burning as much oil, gas, whatnot. And we changed the accounting for emissions from electric generating facilities, from generating facilities located in Rhode Island to the generating facilities used by Rhode Islanders in obtaining their electricity. The difference is we're outliers in doing what we did. It was a way to shift to better numbers, and if we did it for all sorts of emissions, it would make sense. But singling out electrical generation is a trick. So we said, we met our 2020 goals. Well, we stepped over a low bar, and we only did it by giving ourselves a little two-step boost. How does that help us address climate change? That's an insufficient response. And that's why the report has the title it does, and it's why Paul Roselli's fabulous front page graphic tells the story that we could go underwater unless we do something different.
And Paul, you're on this call as well, and you've announced recently that a second, I believe your second run at Rhode Island State Senate. And I'll also link to the report in the episode here. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it'll be in the description. If you're on my website, it'll be in the bio, and I'll tweet it out because it's obviously it's too robust to sit here and we're not going to read it cover to cover. But everyone should see this, especially those who are working on anything related to climate change. The Green New Deal, I think back to, I think it was November, maybe not. I'm all over the place with timeline. There was a Boston Globe event. Actually, it probably was earlier this year. The governor was speaking at this Globe event, and a group of Sunrise Movement protesters had sort of embedded themselves in the crowd, and at one point popped up out of the crowd and rushed the stage and basically demanded that Governor Raimondo sign a Green New Deal for Rhode Island. How much does that sort of thinking, sort of the youth-led thinking that is going on around climate change space play into what would make Rhode Island's response sufficient? Is there a lot of parallels there? And what else do you see from your perspective, both as an environmental activist, someone who's worked on this for decades, and also someone who is now entering, you've always been in the halls of government, you're there, you're a fixture at the State House, but is now once again pushing from a platform-based standpoint environmental issues?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Paul, you want to pick that or do you want me to?
There's one important point to remember here that this document wasn't written by an individual or a small group of people. The Civic Alliance for a Cooler Rhode Island has a great name, and it has some really terrific people who started it. Ken Payne, Timmons Roberts thought that what was lacking in the state was some type of oversight entity, that the EC4 was getting away with too much. As Ken mentioned about how you calculate emissions, either externally or internally. How do you calculate this, and what numbers do you use in order to get over that bar? The Civic Alliance for Cooler Rhode Island. This is our third report, Ken. Is this
our third report, but each one has gotten more aggressive, I'll say.
Yeah.
So that, you send the shot across the bow, right? Then you take another shot, and it's meant to be more than a warning. This is really this is not quite a torpedo, because we're not trying to sink the ship, but this is really ratcheting it up, because we had to shift in 2020 to getting us to much higher levels, about 4 times the annual rate of emissions reduction than previously. And that's just to meet the antiquated goals. That doesn't do what the deeper decarbonization report recommends. And I think Timmons Roberts' piece, as you point out, was which was September 2019, was invaluable in being the platform for this, because it said there's more to the science than what is being embraced by the state. And that, I think Timmons deserves a huge amount. Then the participants in it, we talk about it, every month as we were producing it. They edited, gave input, did all those things. For, I would say, a good 4 months, right?
Right, at least, yeah. I want to answer Bill's question, observation about the Sunrise Movement. That there's there are 2 old white guys here, and we understand that readily and easily. One of the benefits of the Sunrise Movement is their age and their youth. Disruption always matters. This book is an attempt at a disruption. This report is, as Ken says, is more than just a shot over the bow. It's a direct hit. There's a general frustration. I know Ken would agree with me. There's a general frustration, no matter what your age is, that things aren't happening fast enough. And we've been waiting 4, 5, 6 years. The Resilient Rhode Island Act was signed into law, and Ken, please correct me, in 2014.
Correct.
Here we are 6 years later. What measurable activity, what one thing can you look at, can you point to in state government that says that we're on the road, we are now making a dramatic effort to change business as usual? Is there one thing? We're still looking for that. Anything. The accounting process is a disaster. Having this Invenergy project, and I'll bring it up because it deserves attention. Even now, the now head of OER was at those EFSB meetings just about every time there was a public hearing. Not not against the power plant, but being the eyes and ear of the governor who was for it. And that's where we are in the state. I think this is a good report that was created by a good, knowledgeable. Ken's experience and background is far outshines anybody within state government. Timmons Roberts, many of the other members of the Civic Alliance for a Cooler Rhode Island are well versed in all of these activities, all of these issues, and this is the culmination of that experience and that background. We want more than just to sink the ship. We want them to act.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey everyone, for as little as $3 a month, you can support the journalism, entertainment, opinion, and analysis that the Bartholomew Town Podcast has become known for here in Rhode Island and beyond. Visit patreon.com/BartholomewTown and explore the different membership opportunities. You can even become a B-Town Insider, where you'll receive exclusive episodes and other content each month. It's patreon.com/BartholomewTown. I wonder so many times on many issues, but especially this issue, what you look at the soft solutions where, look, solar, there's obviously a tremendous value to solar, but then, sort of the passive way that we've got a little bit of solar and it's sort of become an industrial money maker for certain folks. But, there isn't, and this is just one finite issue, but there isn't necessarily a big push for, broadly folks to have solar panels on their roof, for example, that they're or whatever it may be. Everything has been in this matter. There's just enough, it seems like, whether it's the administration or whomever, to say, look, we're doing things, we're making progress, we're doing the best we can, but not actually making the full scale change to be a leader. They'll also point to Ørsted and the wind turbines, which are valuable, and there's obviously major challenges, environmental challenges that we've discussed. Paul, we've had a recent discussion earlier this year on that, but again, it's not, that's more optics maybe than full scale change. Ken, I wonder what on a practical basis can be done in the next year or two, whether through legislative action, executive order, or the private sector stepping in to push us to a position where we are at least closer to a sufficient response?
First of all, we should amend the renewable energy standard to make the rules for obtaining electricity from renewable sources, the annual rules, higher. The governor's executive order says we're going to get to 100% by 2030, I believe.
Yep.
The problem with an executive order is it's not binding on anyone. It's not something that PUC would rely on in a decision. It's only a desire of a specific administration, and it doesn't live beyond that administration. So what we need to do is a statutory amendment to ramp up the renewable energy standard. That would be, first of all, so that we're having no carbon from electricity generation. Second, we need to then electrify the things that can be electrified. And that means, and that's where the deeper decarbonization report is very clear. It shows that can largely be done. This is not a Rhode Island thing, but it's a national thing. We have to figure out non-carbon-based fuels for things that can't be electrified. And then there is another Rhode Island-based thing. So, and that's fix the food system. That the food system is one of the major sources of carbon emissions globally, and certainly we participate in that system, and we can make changes there that would be able to be beneficial to health, beneficial to social equity, and reduce carbon emissions. Those are 4 things that are doable. And the reality is, if I were to say to you, Bill, run a marathon today, you would say, Payne, you're crazy.
Yeah.
If I say, Bill, why don't you may have planned to run a marathon in 6 months? You say, well, if I trained a little bit every day, ramped up what I was doing, I would probably do it. Well, what we've said is, we don't want to do any training. We don't want to ramp up. We want to just continue business as usual, and we'll get to the marathon later. That's exactly not the way to be able to run a marathon. It's why having you stay on this story is so important, because people have to know you can do stuff, incremental progress makes a difference. The legislation that I wrote between 2006 and 2012, right, in that period of time, now employs 16,000 people in Rhode Island. That's huge. That's huge. And so it's a job generator. That's what the Green New Deal can do. As you have to do green infrastructure improvements to manage changing rain patterns and manage water flow. Green New Deal can help you do that. It'll be beneficial to our landscaping and nursery industry. We can, as we shift from one thing to another, it can be a job generator. And so that of the range of ideas about addressing the reality of climate change, as soon as you say yes, the one that is most mainstream, the one that is least far out, is stuff like the Green New Deal. It really is derivative of FDR kind of thing. And the country didn't fall apart as a result of the New Deal. And it wouldn't fall apart as a result of the Green New Deal either. There are those who say that business community is so hostile to the Green New Deal that the U.S. will not be able to do a middle-of-the-road approach, and that only radical change is available. The reason why we need to give that a shot, and this is where what Sunrise and others, the leadership they're showing, is so important, is we have to create an opportunity for democratic systems to work and not be stifled by cynicism, name-calling, nihilism, all those things which are now rampant.
Paul, in these last few minutes here, and kind of building off of not only the job creation spots or elements of what Ken just said, but thinking about just environmental justice, and as we start to re-examine society, whether it's police reform, education, medicine, medical access, I should say, the reality is climate justice plays into social justice. Wouldn't this be an opportune time to really, start to do things in a way that they haven't been done yet?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Again, I'll go back to our white privilege here, and what we need is a different voice. We need different people with different experiences coming into this game. What I go back to all the time is that without a healthy environment, no matter where you live, health issues pop up almost overnight. Toxic substances, air pollution, asthma, all of those things. There's also a degradation of the immune system. So things like viruses all of a sudden become more rampant in populations where all of those environmental issues are either neglected or on purpose magnified. I think we call them sacrifice zones. We just say, along Allen's Avenue, we give up. We just give up. We'll put the oil depots, we'll put the LNG facilities, we'll put the junkyard, we'll put the salt depot, we'll have trucks going in and out, we'll even do a trash transfer station. Why not, right? We've written that place off. So let's write it off completely. Without a healthy environment, we can't make it. We can't do it. It's key for any civil society, as Ken says, within a democratic system to exert its own democracy. Sunrise does it. We try to do it as a shadow EC4 organization just to make sure they stay on target. It's the responsibility of civic organizations to keep everybody on track. There's no substitute in the democracy. As we go through this, and you're doing it, I remember talking to you years ago when you said you got to do something. You got to do something. After whatever the election was, whatever the year was, you said, I can't sit back and just let this go.
Yep.
And now you're doing what you're doing with podcasts, websites, and hosting shows like this. We need more of that because the status quo, the powers to be, aren't going to do it. They're just not going to do it. Even people in the wings. You know, I mean, you and I have had this discussion. Many of us have had this discussion about, well, if we change the current leadership, I hate to tell you that the next tier of leadership is almost as bad, if not worse, in some cases. So it's now incumbent upon all of us, civic groups like this, Ken Payne, many others, Timmons Roberts, and many more, to get organized and put out reports like this, cause a little disruption, get Sunrise to do it in more places, and for us to make a substantive change so we never have to write a report like this again.
That's the idea, right? Is just to be able to move past the point where these conversations aren't required anymore. Ken, I'll give you the last word here. And really, you know, your work has been integral, as you mentioned, to where we're at now, where Rhode Island isn't currently underwater or currently, filled with toxic smog day to day or whatever it is. You know, it's all relative, I suppose. But what would you like to see from a civic engagement perspective in an election year where we have so much going on right now in other areas with obviously with the virus and with social justice protests? What would you like to see from the younger voices that are leading a lot of the change that's happening right now? What would you specifically like to see them call for here in Rhode Island?
I think that a broad call for social equity is critical at this point in time. That's foundational, and that equity needs to include equity with other species as well. So that the challenge that we have is that we privilege, there's white privilege, and then there's Homo sapien privilege, and that we allow other things to be on the receiving end of our demands for privilege. And so I think that amplifying out that message, which is being done so well. I went to the march on up to the State House several Fridays ago, and was there, and it was wonderful. And I have continue to participate in that. And I really see that as hopeful. And it's not cynical. My goodness, it's not cynical. And it is resolute. So the absence of cynicism and a high measure of resoluteness is just right. It's what I did 50 years ago. I mean, I was suing to block nuclear power plants when I was in my 20s. So it can be done. And I'm hot to retire.
I can see that. That's for sure. This report is excellent, and I will certainly link to it and continue to share it. Paul Roselli, now a candidate for Senate here in Rhode Island. Got to use that title these days. And Ken Payne, a legacy environmental leader here in Rhode Island, someone who is certainly going to be, when the history books are written 500 years from now, you're right there on that chapter. So thanks, gentlemen, for all you've done.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Bartholomew Town is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and wherever you like to get audio. And remember to follow us on your favorite social media channels. Search for the Bartholomew Town Podcast Facebook group and give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Bill Bartholomew.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.